So the first part of our symposium includes just unit advancement, and John Savage is going to be do that. You want to look at the next slide? I think the webinar information. All right, let me go real quickly. This is a webinar, and it's on off of Rig Central, so everyone will be muted. You also, if you have any questions anytime, please post it in the chat. The panelists will be monitoring that, and at times where appropriate, we will bring those questions back and hopefully get those answered as well. And we will have an answer and question period after both presentations, but we will try to entertain the ones that for each of the presentations as they get completed. So with that in mind, I want to go ahead and introduce our first presenter. It's John Savage. John is currently the Great Lakes Division Vice President of Program. So advancement reports into him. But John's background, John's been a longtime scouter. He was the Great Lakes Field Service Council Advancement Chair. He was also recently, until the creation of the National Service Territories, he was also the Central Region Advancement Team Chair or lead that with all the councils, advancement councils kind of reporting to him. So without anything to do, I want to go ahead and let John go. Thank you, John.
Oh, good morning. If we can have the next slide, please, Chris. I always like to start these presentations with some very basic information. I think it helps us kind of remember what we're all about. And the most important piece is the mission statement of the Boy Scouts. I'm going to read it. Think about it. It is a very powerful statement. The mission of the Boy Scouts of America is to prepare young people to make ethical and moral choices over their lifetimes by instilling in them the values of the Scout Oath and Law. Now, when we think about that, over their lifetimes, that's a huge job that we're undertaking. And we may only have a Cub Scout for a few months. But during that time, we hope that we can make an impression that will last a lifetime and that they will then live the rest of their lives by those values in the Scout Oath and Law. We have 4 aims in scouting: character development, citizenship training, mental and physical fitness, and leadership. Notice advancement is not in there. Now, that's kind of a strange statement for me to make as an advancement guy, but it's true. Advancement is a method, one of our 8 methods of scouting, and we hope it will be used. We hope it will be used vigorously, because if there is a good advancement program, it lets us know that our scouts are going to get a lot out of the program, and it is on that path to instilling the values of the Scout Oath and Law. Everything we do should be directed to one of those 4 aims of scouting. And I can assure you, having been involved in this and involved in some of the creation of the program years ago, that everything in advancement, it has been reviewed and does aim toward one of those 4 aims. And the next slide, please. So this is for unit leaders primarily, although certainly district and council leaders will, I hope, get a lot out of it. One of the things that I don't think is as well known as it should be is something called the Guide to Advancement. It is published every 2 years. It is the authoritative and official source on BSA advancement. It is only available now in a downloadable version. It's no longer printed, but you can find it at that URL there on the screen. Go back to it when you get the slides after the presentation. There's a new updated 2021 version. It has a lot of changes, and it answers almost every question that you're going to have about scouting. There's also a new guide to safe scouting that was just released here in the last couple of weeks, and that's also very important for all leaders to be sure they're aware of it and follow it. So go ahead and get that and download it as well. If you can't find your answer in the Guide to Advancement, and as I said, 90% of the answers, probably higher than that you want to know, where can you get some help? Well, the first thing, as I've said, is go to the Guide to Advancement or other official BSA resources, the Advancement News, the Advancement Resources page, and that's also a URL there, although it's not underlined, www.scouting.org/advancement. If that doesn't work, then you go to your council advancement administrators, district and council. And if all else fails, go to your National Service Territory Program Lead. That's the new pathway for advancement, since we no longer have areas and regions. It's the National Service Territory, and the program lead is responsible for advancement. And finally, if all else fails, you can email the advancement team at the national office, but that should be very, very rare because there are plenty of resources available before then. And next slide. In the Guide to Advancement, some terminology is important. And one thing we need to remember is that no council, committee, district, unit, or individual has the authority to add to or subtract from advancement requirements. So sometimes we hear, well, can we fudge that a little bit because it'll help Johnny? Well, the rule is very clear. And in the guide, if it says must or shall, then those are mandates. If it says should, those are recommendations. Those are best practices. And if it says may or can, then there's some flexibility. So please remember that as you're working with the guide and working with advancement in your unit. The next slide. I want to say just a few words about Cub Scout advancement. We, in our advancement committees, we usually spend 99% of our time on Boy Scouts, and that's either merit badge counselors or Eagles. But all of advancement is important. And one of the things well, before I go on, let me mention these numbers you'll see throughout my presentation. These are the sections of the Guide to Advancement that refer to the things I'm talking about. So if you have questions about any of this, this will tell you exactly where to go to find some help. So in Cub Scout advancement, Den meetings follow a traditional school year and are designed to result in advancement for all youth by the end of the school year. So every young man or young lady in Cub Scouting should earn rank by the end of the school year if the program is being followed appropriately. That's something commissioners look at. It's an indicator. Are there exceptions? Of course there are. But for the most part, this should apply to every person in Cub Scouts. And the meeting plans for each Scout adventure are found in Scout Book's Den Leader Experience. That's a new place to look. Used to be a printed manual. Now it's in Scout Book in the Den Leader Experience. And that will, if followed correctly, that will lead to advancement for all Cub Scouts. Next slide. The Bobcat. This is another thing that has been a concern of mine for many years. Except for Lions, all youth begin with the Bobcat rank regardless of their age when they join Cub Scouts. It involves learning about the values, signs, symbols of the Boy Scouts of America and Cub Scouting. And while working on Bobcat, a Cub Scout may work on the age or grade appropriate rank, but they have to finish Bobcat first. It baffles me that we take in thousands of Cub Scouts, new Cubs, every fall, and probably about half of them are reported as having earned the Bobcat rank. Every new Cub Scout should earn a rank and probably 2 ranks in their first year. So that's something I want to emphasize. If you're a Cub leader, be sure that your Cubs are earning the Bobcat and it's getting reported, please. Next slide. Now, I said that there can be no changes to requirements, but in the Cub Scout program, the standard is do your best. And so for Cub Scouts, even those of the same age and grade and gender, there are going to be different developmental timetables. They're going to mature at different rates. So the Cub standard is do your best. And when a Cub Scout has done his or her best, then regardless of the details and the requirements, that requirement should be considered to have been met. Next slide. Another thing that is not always known in Cub Scouting is those situations like homeschooling or non-traditional education, or where youth are working at grade levels that may not correspond to their ages. Please remember that they should work on the age-appropriate rank, no matter where they are in school. And when they do that, then they are ready at the right time to earn their Arrow of Light and go on into scouting right away. Next slide. All right, moving on to Boy Scout advancement. And you notice now we have a new section number in the Guide to Advancement. There are 7 ranks in Scouts BSA, and I have to learn to say Scouts BSA, not Boy Scouts. There are 7 ranks in Scouts BSA that are earned sequentially no matter what age a youth joins the program. Next. So the Scout rank is the very first one. It is a rank, not a badge. It's oriented toward learning all the basic information that every youth needs to be a good Scout, understanding the oath, the law, the motto, the slogan, troop operations, and so on. Tenderfoot, second and first class are about learning the practices and practicing the skills that help Scouts develop confidence and fitness and challenge their thought processes. The requirements for all of these may be worked on simultaneously. However, each rank must be earned in sequence, and there are statements in each of those ranks about since you earned the previous rank. But for instance, nights of camping. You could earn a lot of nights of camping in your first year, even though you might only make it to second class. They're still good for first class, and so on. Next. Requirements for Star Life and Eagle, except those related to merit badges, must be fulfilled after the board review for the previous rank. So this is where we get into things like active participation, service, positions of responsibility, and so on. You can't start that once you reach first class. You can't do those until you've had your previous board review. And in Scouts BSA, unlike what I said about Cubs, requirements must be passed as written. So for example, if the requirement says show, demonstrate, or discuss, then that's what Scouts need to do. Filling out a worksheet, as an example, would not suffice. And also remember that these are individual requirements. So having a group of Scouts together and say, show me a square knot, and one Scout does it and everybody passes, is not the way it works. Every Scout has to demonstrate every requirement individually. Next. All Scout awards, merit badges, badges of rank, and Eagle Palms are only for registered Scouts. And that would include qualified Ventures and Sea Scouts who are not yet 18 years old. So once in a while we get that question, can I go down to the Scout shop and buy a rank? Well, now if you're not registered, no, you can't. Ventures and Sea Scouts can continue to work toward Eagle if they have earned at least first class in a Scouts BSA troop or as a lone Scout. And the only exceptions to that are for Scouts who may be eligible for registration beyond the age of eligibility, as it's called. That's a very special situation for Scouts with disabilities, and that'll be discussed a lot more in the second seminar in 2 weeks. Next. Okay, there are 4 steps in advancement. The Scout learns, the Scout's tested, the Scout's reviewed, and the Scout's recognized. One of the questions that we get a lot is, well, what happens if a Scout has been tested and we've been signed off, but we don't really think he learned what he should have? So this is a direct quote from the Guide to Advancement. And this is, if I'm not mistaken, yes, this is an updated, changed statement. Once a Scout has been tested and signed off by someone approved to do so, the requirement has been met. The unit leader is accountable for ensuring proper advancement procedures are followed. A part of that responsibility includes the careful selection and training of those who approve advancement. If a unit leader believes a Scout has not learned the subject matter for a requirement that has been signed off, he or she should see that opportunities are made available for the Scout excuse me, to practice or teach the requirement. Notice it does not say be retested. The Scouts may complete their learning and further development without being retested. That emphasized phrase there is new in the Guide to Advancement, emphasizing that fact that once it's earned, it's earned. Scout is reviewed. Of course, that is the board review, and then the presentation is made at the troop meeting or the Court of Honor or wherever your unit makes presentations. Reasonable expectations. Concept of reasonable and within reason help unit leaders and boards of review gauge the fairness of expectation for considering some of those special things like, is a Scout active or has he fulfilled a position of responsibility? A unit is, of course, allowed to establish expectations that are acceptable to the chartered organization and the unit committee. But for advancement purposes, Scouts must not be held to those which are so demanding as to be impractical for today's youth and families. And ultimately, this is a situation I get a lot of questions about. Ultimately, a board of review shall, so this is a mandated statement, decide what is responsible, what is reasonable, and what is not. In doing so, the board members must use common sense and must take into account that youth should be allowed to balance their lives with positive activities outside of Scouting. And notice there in parentheses the number 4.2.3.0 if you want to get more information on that. Next. Okay. We have a requirement in Scouts BSA for active participation, but what does that mean? And people have different answers to that. Well, here's what the guide says. There are 3 tests that should be applied. The Scout is registered, the Scout is in good standing with the unit, and the Scout meets the unit's reasonable expectation, or if not, a lesser level of activity is explained. And remember, there is a stated period of time that you have to be active. If the scout takes longer to advance, only the stated period may be required. That's another thing that I hear a lot of questions, especially in Eagle boards of review. Well, yeah, he did his 6 months 2 years ago, but now he wants to get to Eagle. He's not active right now. Well, the requirement says if he put in that 6 months after his life board of review, he or she has met the requirement. Active participation. The ideals of the Boy Scouts are spelled out in the Scout Oath law, motto, and slogan. Members incorporating these ideals in their daily lives, for example, are said to have Scout spirit. This is the wrong heading. This is the Scout spirit slide. Evaluating Scout spirit will always be a judgment call, but through getting to know a Scout and by asking probing questions, we can get a feel for it. We can say, however, that we do not measure Scout spirit by counting meetings and outings attended. It is indicated instead by the way the Scout lives their daily life. Important points to consider, especially for boards of review. Next. Service projects. They should be a regular part of the program in every unit. Service projects required for ranks other than Eagle must be approved according to what is written in the requirements and may be conducted individually or through participation in patrol or troop efforts. A service project work helping an Eagle with their service project is acceptable. But of course, I'm losing myself here, sorry. Service project work for ranks other than Eagle clearly calls for participation only. Planning, development, or leadership must not be required until you get to Eagle. And time for Scouts to spend assisting on Eagle projects should be allowed in meeting these requirements. And of course, always the reminder, national safety standards apply. Next. Okay, positions of responsibility. When a Scout assumes a position of responsibility, something related to the desired results must happen. Notice that this says position of responsibility. It does not say position of leadership. That's a common misconception. A position of responsibility. So, for example, a troop historian will have a responsibility, but not necessarily be leading others. Where there are unit expectations, the Scout satisfies the requirement if, within reason and based on their skill set, they meet those expectations. Next. Where there are no unit expectation, the Scout satisfies the requirements if the unit leader and the Scout work out the responsibilities the Scouts to fulfill, and the Scout maintains the position's purpose or difficulty. Or if a Scout determines what should be done, must make a reasonable effort and must not be held to unestablished expectations. This is another pitfall that unit leaders want to be aware of. Did you establish your expectations for this position of responsibility upfront and clearly? Was it understood by the Scout? These, if not, then it says here the Scout gets to make that determination. But again, be sure that you're fair and that your expectations are the same for everybody. All right, moving on. If responsibilities are not met, this can happen. Communicate early. Seek constructive results. Encourage the Scout. Address the situation promptly. And if you absolutely have to, remove the Scout and give a new position. But that should not happen very often because, after all, we are about growth and learning here. And only in rare cases, if ever, Should troop leaders inform a scout that time once served will not count? If they put in the time and you didn't tell them there was a problem until afterward, that's on you, not on them. Next, please. Now, what happens if you say the scout has not fulfilled the responsibility and the scout disagrees? Well, first ask yourself, are the expectations unreasonable and not clearly conveyed to the youth? We talked about that just a minute ago. And then discuss with leaders and parents. But here's the kicker. If the scout still says, I believe I fulfilled the requirement as written, then that scout must be granted a board review, and the board review will make the final decision. We get that fairly often where, well, I'm not going to let this scout have a board review because I don't think such and such requirement was met. Well, sorry, folks, but the scout must be granted a board review if he or she requests it. Another interesting area to consider is, can a single activity fulfill multiple requirements? One of the examples I used to use, the requirements have changed, but it still is a good example, is CPR is required for first aid, for life-saving, for some other badges as well, used to be. Now, does that mean you have to take CPR 3 times to earn those 3 badges? Well, no, it doesn't. So 2 requirements that match exactly and have the same basic intent can both be fulfilled by doing it once. For safety reasons, the scout must remember any previous information. So if it's been a couple of years and the scout says, well, I did that, I want to count it. Well, okay, a quick review, be sure they remember it, but be aware that requirements that appear to align but actually aren't the same cannot be used twice. There are some examples in the Guide to Advancement. If you have questions about that, I recommend that you look it up and check it out. But remember, the bottom line here is the purpose of the advancement experience. So couple of examples are in the citizenship badges where for more than one badge you have to attend a meeting, but what you have to do at the meeting is different. So you might use that one meeting twice, but you've got to do both activities, things like that. All right, moving on. Venturing. Something new in venturing that some of you may not be aware of, but venturing awards are now ranks. Venturing, Discovery, Pathfinder, and Summit are the are ranks, and the Venturing Award requires a service project. So that becomes an interesting question. How do we handle this? To determine if a Summit service project is acceptable, 4 focus areas are considered. Service, a valuable action, deed, or effort carried out to meet a need. Scope and complexity, the scale of the project, the level of effort and planning should be appropriate to the highest award in venturing. Leadership, leading others toward a shared vision. And a personal goal connection, making the most of the experience, including what is important to the venturer. We're going to talk in a bit about some of these things in much more detail, but it is possible for a venturer to need a little more time after age 21 to complete the Summit Award, and those time extensions can be granted using the same procedures that we'll discuss in a bit as far as the Eagle. And that same, we'll say it again, but that same process also applies to Quartermaster and Sea Scouts. Summit Board of Review, a big change. The Board of Review, the decision of the Summit Board of Review must be unanimous. Up until now, it was a majority decision. Now it must be unanimous. And as I just said, time extensions follow the same procedures as Eagle. Next. Sea Scouts. Sea Scout ranks are apprentice, ordinary, able, and quartermaster. Again, there's a quartermaster service project, and the quartermaster service project workbook is available from www.seascouts.org. Again, time extensions for quartermaster follow the same rules as Eagle. And note a change in terminology. Sea Scouts also now have a board of review where it used to be called a bridge of review. Next. Okay, merit badge policies. This can become interesting. A scout may work on any merit badge at any time. Now, that's something that we want to be a little careful about. Let's say that Susie Scout goes to summer camp and says, I want to earn life saving. Well, there's only one minor problem. Susie can't swim. So what's going to happen? Well, the scoutmaster, the unit leader, whoever's working with the advancement at that camp, is going to talk to Susie and discuss with her, is this really a good idea? You know, do you really think you can do that when you can't even pass the swimmer test? But here's the catch. If Susie says, you know, that's my goal, I want to give it a try, Susie must be given the opportunity to try. Now, may not get far because, as I recall, requirement number 1 is pass the swimmer test. But nevertheless, we can't tell Susie, no, you can't, you may not attempt that badge. We counsel, and then if Susie insists, she gets to try and probably will learn more from not passing than she ever would have by just being told no. A scout may begin work on a merit badge before contacting a counselor. Now, again, the normal procedure says you talk to your scoutmaster, and then you talk to your counselor, and then you start work. But hey, sometimes young people jump the gun, and that's okay. Now, when they go to see the counselor, the work has to be acceptable. But if they've done some things ahead of time, that's okay. When the scout is starting on the trail toward a merit badge, the first step, ideally, the unit leader discusses the merit badge with the scout and provides the name of at least one approved counselor. But notice that this doesn't say the unit leader gives approval for the scout to earn a merit badge. We have seen this at times where unit leaders believe that this was an approval, and if they denied it, they could say, no, I won't give you a blue card. But in fact, the scout has the right to try, and the scout has the right to go to a different counselor. This is a discussion and a counseling session. It's not an approval. Another thing, and this is primarily for merit badge counselors, is that on a statement on unofficial worksheets and learning aids, there are a lot of those out there that come from scout-friendly organizations that try to be helpful and may put out worksheets, and a lot of them are great. Two things to be careful of. One is, do they meet the current requirements? Because sometimes, things get on the internet and never change. And the other is that they cannot be required. You can give the scout a worksheet and say, hey, I think this will help you, but unless the requirement says to do something in writing, they are only aids and cannot be required. And again, I want to emphasize, be very cautious about using those that you get off the internet. Be sure that they are from reputable sources and are up to date. Requirements change all the time. Next. Okay, the official merit badge application is called the blue card, and most unit leaders will be familiar with that. But what we're finding now is that a lot of places, summer camps especially, are working with alternates and electronic forms and so on. So the new guide to advancement says this: other options may be used, but it is expected that when blue cards are not used, advancement administrators at all levels will find ways to carry on the processes, interactions, documentation, and other nuances that make the process such a critical element in the BSA mission achievement. And one of the things that that I think we've lost over the years in the merit badge program is that step of the scout contacting someone that they don't know, make that phone call, make that appointment. I remember when I was a scout, that was one of the scariest things I had to do, was pick up the phone and call a stranger and make an appointment. Now, of course, how we do that has changed with youth protection and all that, but that concept of going and meeting someone that you don't know and working with that person and learning from them is a part of the counseling process that we want to be sure we keep in mind. Also remember that merit badge counselors must be registered and approved by the council, and that's very important for the unit to make sure that any counselor that a scout is going to is properly trained and approved and registered. And something new in the guide this time: every merit badge counselor should take merit badge counselor specific training, which is available online at my.scouting.org. That is a national standard training now. Of course, we still offer in-person training, which follows the same materials. But I think the point here is that we want to be very, very sure that our counselors not only have passed youth protection training, but also understand the process of being a merit badge counselor. Next. Okay, this one I want to emphasize because, again, it has to do with the youth protection piece. And this is a quote from the guide. Counseling should take place at a location conducive to the subject matter at hand that satisfies youth protection requirements. In-person meetings are preferred because they enrich the experience. Counselors should first confirm that with the scout that he or she has discussed with the unit leader the scout's interest in working with the merit badge. So there again, that thing of talk to your scoutmaster first and then go to the counselor. Now we're asking counselors to confirm that that's happened. Then counselors should move on with discussions about what the scout already knows. Could be followed by coaching, guidance, additional meetings, not only for passing the candidate on the requirement, but also to facilitate an understanding of the subject. One of the things we hope counselors will do is not just the bare minimum, which of course in requirements cannot be changed, but we want to encourage these scouts to take a deeper dive, learn a little more. It's amazing how many very successful people you will talk to who say, you know, I got the interest in my career because of that merit badge that I did in Scouts. And that's part of the counseling process. The counselor is going to try to spark that interest in something that they are interested in. Next. Okay, boards of review, and I said this already. Boards of review must be granted when requirements are met or when the scout believes they completed the requirements. We must not expect the scout to request or organize the board of review. Important point. Some troops say to the scout, okay, you want a board of review? Go find 3 people to sit on it. No, the unit is responsible for setting up the board of review. We must not put the scout off. If the scout thinks that they're ready for a board, we hold a board. We don't say, okay, well, our next set of boards review is 6 months from now. And we must not ask the scout to exceed the stated requirements for the rank. Next. The composition of the board. Boards of review are composed of 3 to 6 members at least 21 years of age. Unit leaders and assistants shall not serve on a board of review in their unit. I've seen that in the past, to go to do a board of review and, oh, the assistant scoutmaster's here. Nope. Unit leaders and assistants shall not serve on a board of review in their unit. A parent or guardian shall not serve on a board of review for his or her own, it says son, should be child. And the candidate, parent, or guardian has nothing to do with selecting the members of the board. That is up to the unit, or when we get to the Eagle, then the district and council get involved. Is a uniform required for a board review? Well, notice what it says. A full field uniform is preferred. But there are many cases where that may not be possible. So the scout should wear as much of the uniform as they own, wear the uniform as correctly as possible, or wear the uniform that their unit normally uses. So, you know, you may have a unit where, for whatever reason, the uniform is a troop t-shirt and jeans. Well, then that's what they should wear. And if the scout doesn't have a uniform, then dress neat and clean and appropriately according to their means. So this especially applies to some areas of scouting where affording a uniform may be difficult, and such things. All right, next. The board of review is not a retest. It's not a challenge to the scout's knowledge. It focuses on the scout's journey. It's a chance for the unit to learn how the scout feels about how things are going, and also to learn about the scout himself or herself. What are your challenges that you've had to overcome? What are the things that you've learned while doing this rank? What are the things you've enjoyed? The specific tests, the specific requirements don't really come into the board of review. And obviously, maybe not, so we'll say it, we don't expect perfection. Scouting is about learning. Scouting is about developing. So we meet the scout where he or she is. We look for growth. We look, obviously, that the minimum requirements as written have been achieved. But most important, we want to be sure the scout has a positive experience. Next. In all boards of review now, this is a change in the new guide. In all boards of review, a unanimous decision is required to advance. Now, what if there isn't a unanimous decision? Well, first of all, we don't really discuss that in great detail with the scout, what the specifics are. We discuss the areas that need improvement. Notice it says this must be done verbally and in writing. That's something I don't think most units are accustomed to doing. If a scout is not ready to advance, they need a written statement of what they need to do. And the board of review may be adjourned and reconvened at a later date. So rather than just saying, sorry, you didn't get the rank, you're dead, have a nice day, we say, well, we think you still need to improve in these areas, so we're going to give you a chance to do that and then get back together sometime in the future, maybe a specified time, may not be, and see whether you have improved to the point that we can recommend you. Again, always making it as positive as possible and helping the scout grow and learn. Next. Okay, video conferencing. This has become real popular in the last 18 months. Boards of review are meant to be face-to-face and personal experiences. Notice that personal. I ran into a situation once where people were running group boards of review. That is not acceptable. A separate board for each scout. However, from time to time, due to communicable disease, or as scouts go off to college or the military or live in remote locations, it may be difficult to hold an in-person board. And in those situations, it is acceptable to use video conferencing, but such boards must be conducted according to the following requirements, and I didn't put them in here, but if you have that situation, go to 8.0.1.6 in the Guide to Advancement to get those details of how to appropriately conduct a board review through video conferencing. Next. Now the Eagle Scout. Eagle Scout Board Review may be conducted at the unit, district, or council level. The council determines the method. I believe in various parts of the Michigan Crossroads Council, we do a couple of different methods. We don't have council-wide boards, but we do have unit boards with a representative from the district advancement committee, and I believe there are also places where we have district boards of review. Those are all acceptable as long as they follow the guidelines. Composition of the board, no fewer than 3 and no more than 6 members. Shall not, and that's true, by the way, for all ranks, not just Eagle, shall not occur until after the application has been verified. If you're not familiar with that process, I think Pete's going to talk about that in a lot more detail in a little bit, but there is a process by which the application gets verified and must not be postponed due to unresponsive references. We get that sometimes where the letters of reference didn't come back. Well, okay, we still go ahead with the board review after a reasonable time. And another common misconception there is the role of the scout in getting those letters of reference. On the application, the scout is required to give 6 references, okay? Or there's an exception, 5 if they're not employed and so on. But anyway, the scout fills in those references. From that point, it is the responsibility of the adults in the unit to contact those references. That may be by phone, that may be by letter, whatever process, but it is not the scout's responsibility to get those references in, it's the unit's responsibility. The only thing you may ask the scout to do is to deliver a letter requesting a reference to that, that person, and the references should never be returned to the scout. They should be sent to a designated person, such as the committee chair, or possibly the district representative to the board of review. The scouts should not be involved in that, and the references should never be returned to the scout afterward. Think of it as a job interview. You don't get to see the references that people sent on you. Now, if the person giving the reference wants the scout to have a copy, they're certainly welcome to give that to the scout, but not the one that goes to the board of review. That's never returned to the scout. Just like, if I write a reference for someone for a job interview, especially if it's someone I'm giving a glowing reference to, I may make a copy and ship it to the person and say, hey, thought you'd like to know what I said about you. But that's not something that happens in the board review process. Board review for Eagle should last no more than about 30 or 45 minutes. So it's not a heavy grilling. It's, again, a chance to look at the journey, look at what the scout has learned, how the scout has grown. Possibly, if there are questions about the project or about the leadership, position or responsibility, or some of those things, even active participation, then we dive into those a little more. But the whole purpose of the board is to look at the journey and really congratulate the scout on achieving something very, very special. And next slide. Board review under disputed circumstances. This is something that unit leaders should be aware of, but it should happen very, very rarely. It would be used when, for instance, there's a dispute over whether a requirement was met, or for some reason the unit leader says, I'm not going to sign that application. I don't think this person deserves to be an Eagle. Or a Scoutmaster conference is not held for some reason. I had a call just this week from someone who said, I've got this situation where the unit leader refused to sign and the scout wants a board review. What am I going to do? Well, the answer is pretty clear in the guide. You're going to hold a board review under disputed circumstances, and then the board is going to decide whether these requirements were met or not. And it can also be held if for some reason there's a feeling that the unit board review will not be fair. And we get that occasionally where a parent says, I really just think somebody in this unit's got it in for my scout and I don't think we're going to get a fair board. Okay, that's where the district or council can step in. And then when these boards of review are held, they're held by the district or council and the unit is not involved. They're very rare. They do happen. But it's also something that units need to know. If they feel that they can't offer the scout a board review, then they need to contact the district, and in our case, in Michigan, contact the district and say, you know, there's a problem here, and I can't hold this board review. Then the district will step in. Next, appeals. This is another thing that comes up rarely, but can. So lower ranks are not appealable. So the decision of the board of review is final. But remember, I said that if you think that the scout is not going to be able to pass the board, then adjourn it and help the scout make corrections to be successful. For star and life ranks, if for whatever reason the board does come down with a flat no, that can be appealed to the district or council, and their decision is final. And only in the case of Eagle, Quartermaster, and Summit is there a process where an appeal, a final appeal, could go to the National Council. That would happen only after a district or council appeal was held, and again the rank was denied. I can't ever recall a time when the situation couldn't be resolved at the local level. I don't think I've ever seen an appeal to the National Council, but it is in the process. And next, the Scout Service Project. I hope I'm not stealing too much of Pete's thunder here. So the requirement, plan and develop is the first part of it. Planning and development takes forethought. Detailed planning takes place after the proposal is approved. This is something that we want to be a little careful of. That first planning step is kind of an outline. It doesn't have to have all the details. The purpose is to get it down on paper so that any things where either the reviewer can make suggestions to make it easier, or where there may be things that the scout hasn't thought about, that you say, well, yeah, did you think about, you may need to do this, you may need to do that, so that again, it's going to be a successful situation. The detailed planning takes place later. You don't want to categorically reject a project without careful consideration. If the project falls within the rules, you want to let it go. Now, obviously, if it says, for instance, I'm going to do such and such a project for my scout camp, then you're going to say, no, you need a different project, because as we'll see in a minute, these projects may not be done for BSA itself. But as a general rule, the idea is to help the scout have a successful project. And things to consider, the opportunity for planning, development, leadership, and of course, service. Next slide. Give leadership to others. Who does that mean? It means at least 2 people besides the scout. So an Eagle project may have as few as 3 people working on it. The people don't have to be members of BSA. They may or may not. But they should be age appropriate for the project. So We'll run into projects that require some fairly sophisticated power tools, for instance. Then the helpers need to be adults who are qualified to run that equipment. And that becomes very interesting. How does a scout give leadership to an adult? But they do. And each project is evaluated on a case-by-case basis. No minimum requirements or expectations. There was a time years ago when if you didn't have X number of hours in your Eagle project, it wasn't going to fly. That's no longer considered appropriate. There is no minimum. And each project, as I think I said already, is evaluated on an individual basis. And the next slide. This is a key one. Benefiting an organization other than scouting. The project beneficiary must not be BSA, and that includes camps and all those things. Could be the chartered organization, could be another youth serving organization, could be a school or a church. There are more details in the Guide to Advancement. With rare exceptions, it should not be for an individual. Although I have seen situations, for instance, where an elderly person in the community needed a handicapped ramp to get in and out of their house, and one of the service organizations was in the business of helping those things. So a scout worked with that service organization to help do this particular ramp. There are ways that can be done, but as a general rule, they shouldn't be for individuals. Next. Proposal must be approved before you start. But remember, it's just an overview. It's just the start of planning. And you want to look for the following tests. Will it likely meet the requirement? Is it feasible? Have the safety issues been addressed? Does it outline action steps, and does it place the scout on track for a positive experience? Here's another little side note. What if you say in reviewing a project, well, I don't think you can do this. I don't think this is feasible, or for whatever reason, you're really discouraging the scout from doing the project, unless it's an absolute violation of the rules. That scout still has the right to go ahead, and that's stated in the project workbook, that a scout doesn't have to take the advice of the people, the adults, and sometimes that leads to what might be considered failure, to a project that in the end is not approved, and they have to do another project. But you know what? That's a really important learning experience. So we want to be careful that we that we honor the scout's right to try and learn from failure. And the next slide. The Eagle Scout Service Project is the official workbook, and it is required, and the latest edition is required. So whenever a scout is starting on a project, someone working with that scout in the unit, their Eagle coach, the district approver, whatever, needs to be sure that they have the latest and greatest. I believe the newest one, I thought I had a note here, the newest one I believe came out early this year, but it's always on scouting.org, and it's always downloadable. And so what do you have in there? You've got the approval signatures, you've got any limitations, you've got suggestions, and an outline of the project. And after that initial approval, then more detailed planning and a final report. Next. Okay. Use only the official workbook. No changes or additions to the workbook are authorized. At the end of the day, an incomplete workbook is not the basis for project rejection, because again, the workbook is a tool. The proposal and project report should be completed, and completion of the project plan is strongly encouraged, but it's not required. And again, that's going to vary a lot depending on the project, the complexity of the project, and so on. But at the end of the day, we want to remember that the service and the leadership are the important points. This is not an exercise in creative writing. It's not about what we can write down. It's about what we can do. Next. Next slide, please. Okay, some common misconceptions. There is no minimum number of hours required on an Eagle project. I mentioned that before. Only one candidate may receive, well, this is not a misconception, this is a true statement. Only one candidate may receive credit for working on the same project. Occasionally we have situations where several scouts want to work on the same project and get credit. That is not acceptable. Although if it's a really large project, it may be able to be broken down into phases and each phase be a separate project. But in any particular project, only one scout gets that credit. And it doesn't have to have lasting value. We used to say a project had to have lasting value. That is no longer true. Okay, next. So when we evaluate it, we want to evaluate the impact. What benefit did it have to the school, the religious institution, the community, and what leadership was provided? We want to know that planning and development are in evidence, but as I've said, don't require more planning that's necessary. The planning, the workbook should not overshadow the project itself. Next. Once in a while, the unit leader or the project beneficiary may choose not to approve the project if they don't think that the service was sufficient. So then the candidate can be requested to do more work, or the candidate can be requested to start over with a new project. What are the candidate's options? Well, number one, obviously, is comply with the request. But maybe the candidate says, well, I'm sorry, but I think I did what needed to be done. And I don't feel I should have to do anymore. So then the candidate has the option to decline that request, submit the application without the final approval signatures, and then a board of review must be granted if requested, and the board of review will make the final decision. Did the intent of the requirement, was the intent of the requirement met? And that can happen, sometimes we get project beneficiaries who get go a little overboard in what they want the scouts to do, and so on. So there's always this escape clause. And next. The board of review should approve the project if the proposal was approved, if planning and development was adequate, the project was well led and carried out to the satisfaction of the unit and project beneficiary. If not, then we go to that other question. Rejections should be very, very rare. Requirement 5, as written, was clearly not satisfied, and the project approval may never be withheld for reasons unrelated to the project itself. Next slide. And then we come to the appendix of the Guide to Advancement. And there are several things in there that you may want to at least know exist. There's advancement and recognition, literature and resources. There's a form for reporting merit badge counselor concerns. This is one we didn't mention as we went through counseling, but sometimes you will hear someone say, you know, I really don't think my scout earned that that badge. I know the requirements weren't met. Well, then you fill out this form and send it to the Council Advancement Committee, and they will investigate and work with the counselor to make sure that things are done right in the future, or possibly not renew that counselor. But the important point here is fill out the form. Just a verbal report is not sufficient. If it's not in writing, it didn't happen. So you know, those things happen, and sometimes they're legitimate. One of my favorite stories, when I was a scout, a group of my friends earned corn farming merit badge at a weekend camporee. Well, one of the requirements for corn farming merit badge was to grow a patch of corn. And to this day, I have not figured out how they earned that in a weekend. I see Troy laughing. Good. The joke got through. But that's a true story. So there's also in here the request for extension of time to earn the Eagle rank, the request for a belated Eagle application, request for registration beyond the age of eligibility. Again, this is for scouts with special needs and is a topic of our webinar in 2 weeks, and the individual scout plan, which is something that can be useful to units if they have a scout who, for whatever reason, is not progressing either in advancement or in perhaps behavior. There are ways to use that individual scout plan to help everybody have a successful experience. Okay, and next, some general resources. Places you can go for more information. I've mentioned the Guide to Advancement, which is available for download online. It's no longer printed. There is also a place on the website where the guide, you can click on different sections of the Guide to Advancement, but that has not always kept up with the latest changes. So you want to compare that to the 2021 guide. If you're using it, be sure you've got the latest information. There's the Advancement News, which comes out every couple of months with a lot of good stuff in it. If you're not subscribing to Advancement News, I would suggest that you do. There's also the Abilities Digest for help with working with scouts with special needs. And then other supporting documents that can be helpful to a unit in getting the most out of their advancement or their scouting program. I mean, Guide to Awards and Insignia isn't advancement per se, but helpful. And I believe we have some more resources on the next slide. Okay, so all those things I mentioned and more, you're going to find at well, anyway, that whole long thing there, scouting.org/program/scoutsbsa, etc. More forms, the application for alternate Eagle merit badges, that's again is for Scouts with disabilities. The rank application, the workbook, oh, here we are, updated 2/5/21. Application to be an Eagle Project coach, the advancement plan, navigating the Eagle Scout Service Project, information for beneficiaries, request for extension of time, a request for registration beyond the age of eligibility, the summit workbook, the summit application, just all kinds of things there. And I haven't listed all of them by any means. Things that can be helpful. There's also in that section the merit badge list. And as we know, a lot of merit badges are no longer being listed in, are no longer being printed. They're only online. And as requirements change, the latest requirements will always be on that link on the advancement page. Chris, if you can go back to the previous page for just 1 second. I want to emphasize up there at the top, scouting.org/programs. And if you go to that link, it's not advancement specific, but it'll take you then to Cub Scouts, Boy Scouts, venturing, Sea Scouts with the basic information, a lot of helps, videos, things you can use with parents. It's just a great resource, being updated all the time. So a good place to know and go if you're not familiar with it. Okay, next. So other things, whoops. Well, anyway, here we are. More things that are available in the advancement resources page. The Essentials of Merit Badge Counseling, the guide to for merit badge counselors. Here's the merit badge list I mentioned, and so on. And also the latest merit badge requirements, which that's actually a URL there. Sorry, it's not exactly visible, but that is the URL for the merit badge requirements. Maybe when this comes out after the program and we can see it on a full screen, we'll be able to get that. If not, you can get to it from this link at the top, and it'll be there. All right, and now the next. I wanted to take a minute to talk about the many awards that are available, because the official name of the committee is Advancement and Recognition. And so there are 50 or more various awards that Scouts can earn, that adults can earn, that can be some by nomination only, some you fill out the requirements. There's just a ton of stuff out there, and I just want to put that in here. Again, the URL, scouting.org, Awards Central. There are things out there that can do two things. They can really enrich the program for your Scouts, and they can also be really nifty ways to recognize adults for their contribution to Scouting. One that I'm just noticing, because I've heard a lot about it just recently, the third one down in the middle column, the Albert K. Fretwell Outstanding Educator Award. This is something that's designed for units to use to thank the folks at the school who help them hold their meetings and have a successful program in the schools. It's basically a freebie. You fill out the certificate and give it to maybe the school board president and maybe the janitor, whoever has really helped you have a successful program. So there are lots of those things. On the next page, I believe we talk about, no, just more of the same. So again, you can see there are lots of awards. Here we are, the Community Organization Award. So there are a whole bunch of these that are available. Some of them, again, by nomination. Most of these, I believe, are by nomination, or they're awarded by a community organization for service in scouting. The American Legion Award, I noticed, for instance, is an award for members of the AMVETS who are scout leaders. So things to be aware of, things to maybe encourage folks to look into a little more. I noticed just flip by in the chat that you're having trouble reading this page, and yes, I understand, and I apologize for that. And so also we want to mention the Conservation Awards. Something that most people don't get involved in, but it's a great way to add something maybe for an older scout who has gotten an eagle and still has some time. Maybe they want to get into one of the conservation awards. There is the one at the top, the BSA and Environmental Protection Agency 50th Anniversary Award. That's only available for 1 year. That'll be a pretty special one. The Distinguished Conservation Service Award, which replaces the Hornaday, and a bunch of others. And I believe, Chris, that might be the last slide, I think. Corey, I think I have just a couple of minutes left if there are some questions, or do you want to move on and save all the questions for the end?
Well, there's a couple in here, John, that have kind of flown by and haven't been addressed yet. A lot of them have. Perry and Troy have been pretty wonderful about responding to things and inserting links. There's one a couple of people have noted as a reminder, if we edit slides later, to replace a word in there so that we use the word rank in your Eagle Awards. That was a little bit confusing for someone. There is a question about Eagle mentors that actually Pete is going to address later on, and the next section of today's symposium is all about the Eagle rank and the process of going towards Eagle rank. Someone asked a question about what to do if you have a scout who is an atheist. Is that something you can address, John? I'm trying to find the exact question.
Yeah. Then you need to go back to, well, I guess the simplest answer to that is a scout is not, a person is not eligible for membership in the Boy Scouts if that person is an atheist. Our Declaration of Religious Principles says that every member of the organization must have a belief in a higher being, although we do not specify in any way, shape, or form how that belief is held or carried out. So everyone who joins signs on the application that they do in fact have a belief in a higher being. Now, that with older scouts, that might have changed over time. but normally, if you really talk to the scout in detail, you'll discover that one of two things is going on. Either there is something hiding there. Well, yeah, I don't go to church, but yeah, I guess I do believe that there's some kind of power up there that keeps the world spinning. Or you'll find that it's a scout who is maybe questioning, but isn't really fully an atheist. If you have a scout who is absolutely a committed atheist, then you need to talk to your professional, because that is a membership issue.
We have Clarissa asking, do Scoutmasters or trained adult leaders need to be present at an Eagle Scout project execution when Scouts are present to help the Eagle Scout?
Not the Scoutmaster specifically. There needs to be appropriate adult, youth protection, variety, too deep leadership, but it doesn't have to be the Scoutmaster per se.
And I think that was it for the questions in the chat. There were a couple other ones that I believe Pete is going to be able to answer actually in his next section.
Okay, and then by my watch, we're right on time. So let's give it to Pete.
All right, hang on. First, I want to thank John for pulling this presentation together. Very well done. I'd like to take a 5-minute break to allow people to go to, refill their coffee cups or whatever. So in 5 minutes, we'll restart with Pete. And please, Pete's got a bunch of information going into more detail about the Eagle Scout process. And we are going to roll out the new Eagle Scout verification processes. You don't want to miss that. So, all right, 5 minutes, we'll get going again. And we'll be starting with Pete.
If somebody wants to bring up my first slide, we can have that on the screen.
All right, welcome back. Hopefully you got able to refill your coffee cup. We're going to begin the second part of our presentation. Let me first introduce our presenter. Our presenter is actually Pete Townsend. He's actually out of the Great Chippewa District in the Great Lakes Division. Pete's been involved with advancement for a long, long time. Actually, he was started in the part of the old Clinton Valley Council, then eventually joined the Great Lakes Field Service Council, and he continued in his role as part of in the MCC in the Great Lakes Division. So, Pete, without further ado, I'll turn it over to you.
Oh, thank you very much, Perry. And I'm going to take this as though I'm talking to the Scouts. This presentation is normally used for boys that are going from Star in Life, boys that are intending to go for Eagle. So I go through it pretty well. Now, John has done a lot of things, covered a lot of the stuff that I'm going to be covering as well, sometimes from a little bit different perspective though, so you'll hear it maybe from a different angle from me as well. But what I'm going to be doing is talking as though I'm talking to the Boy Scouts, because they're the ones that are actually going for Eagle. So if I use the terms scout or something like that, just take with a grain of salt. I'm actually talking to you guys right now. So let's get on here. I want to come for very quickly the non-project requirements. They are the ones that we sometimes gloss over. John has covered them pretty well. But we're going to get into the project in a lot of detail. But they have to have a minimum of 21 merit badges, of which 13 are required. It's going to be 14, by the way, by the time we get to next July, because we have the Citizenship in the Society merit badge coming around probably in another month now. They have to have a minimum of 6 months as Life Scout and 6 months in a position of responsibility. And incidentally, those don't have to be the same 6 months. They don't have to be coincide, and they don't have to be contiguous. They can be any 6 months as long as they meet that requirement. Whereas in any other rank, they just handed a couple of pieces of paper to their advancement person in the unit, and they got their next rank. Have to actually fill out an Eagle application. They have to write a statement of what they intend to do with their life, and they have to have the application verified by council. That's all stuff that is in addition to the project. So let's go to the next slide here. I want to cover really quickly the Eagle mentor or advisor. It is very strongly recommended that a boy or a girl have an adult assigned as an Eagle mentor or advisor. In many districts, that person will be required to go with the scout when they go for their Eagle project review and to get their proposal approved. National talks about, go to the next slide, please. National talks about an Eagle coach or mentor. That's really somebody at a district or council level that does nothing but work with Eagles. Very few districts that I know of have the luxury of having such a person, nor is it necessarily the best. Assigning a mentor or an advisor from the unit gives a much more personal and active assistant to the scout, and it's somebody that they can contact very conveniently through the unit when they're having regular unit meetings and things like that. Next. This person could be a member of a unit committee. It could be anybody that has been a parent of an earlier Eagle Scout, but it's somebody that needs to understand what it means to be going for an Eagle project. So next, we want to think of this person really as a trail clarifier or clearer rather than a trailblazer. There's all sorts of things that this person can do to help the scout have a better project, have a better proposal, and work over some of the things that they are going to be learning as a result of doing this project. Next. So let's go on now to the Eagle project itself. And while a Life Scout, there are three things that you've got to do: plan, develop, and give leadership to others. Note that there's also three different organizations, and we go over pretty well with the Scouts when we're going through their project review. But plan, develop, and give leadership to others are the three things that are involved in a Scout project. So next, please. A recommendation. And I'm talking to the Scouts now. From the very beginning, keep track of everything. We recommend that you have a notebook of some kind that you can use to keep track of everything that's happened. I recommend to the kids when I'm meeting with them that they keep a little pocket notebook. And every time they think of something, they write it down in that notebook. Every time they talk to somebody, keep track of all of the time that's involved, who you're talking to, the number of hours that are in that. And a note there at the bottom of the page there, National for some reason doesn't like the word man hours. They keep using the word hours, but they don't mean that. In all cases, when you're writing things down, they're talking about man hours. In other words, people times time. So if you have two people working with you for 2 hours, that's 4 man hours. Okay, next. John just covered this pretty thoroughly. You must use the Leadership Service Project Workbook, and it must be the latest version. The latest version, incidentally, has a sheet in there that you actually give to your beneficiary so that they know what's going on in more detail than probably a lot of them would think of. Be careful. Note at the bottom there, as John mentioned, there's a lot of unofficial websites out there that have a lot of things, and even some councils I've looked at have outdated material on them, including the workbook. So make sure you go to the national website and get the national website documents as you're going through things. And next, please. The workbook is divided into 3 sections. The proposal, this is what you're going to get approved. The final plan, this is what you must do to complete to show that you made the plan. Now, John said that that is not actually required, and that's really true. But if you want to be careful, because a final plan is the thing that's going to help flesh out some of the details. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. And then the final report. Obviously, nothing is done until you write a report on it. Okay, some limitations. It can't be routine labor, property for BSA or business or whatnot. There's 2 at the bottom there that I want to comment on, though. It can't be a one-man show. And a one-man show, for instance, website development. You must involve leading others. Website development mostly is a one-man job. Maybe you'll have somebody working with you, but they'll be working independently of you on a different section of it. So a one-man show doesn't really become a good project of any kind. And not a cookie cutter. Almost every flag retirement or blood drive that I've ever seen they dictate to you what material you must use, how you must do it. There is very little opportunity for individual planning, so you can't really do a good job of planning. So blood drives and flag retirements are really things that will be scrutinized if you try to use them. And again, realize I'm talking as though I'm talking to the boys now. There's the old saw that John mentioned about you must have a minimum of 100 man hours. That is absolutely not true, but realize that when you're advising boys, they don't think how long things will take. A good project generally runs in the order of 150 to 200 man hours. So and the other thing is that you've got to be careful of is that make sure that the project doesn't necessarily involve only parents or siblings. Sometimes that's really hard to demonstrate leadership. And that's the one thing that we want the project to do. We want you to show your leadership and develop some additional leadership skills as a result of leading this. Next, project timing. I mentioned that average projects take 150 to 200 man hours, but from an elapsed time standpoint, they can take sometimes 4 to 6 months. And look at all of the different things that could be involved. I had one project where it was involving the DNR, and that took almost 8 months to get an approval on it. So be careful when boys are proposing a project. Make sure that they understand what sort of timing is involved in this. And also, if your beneficiary has a need for it by a certain time, you want to make sure that you've got that covered as well. All of this has to be done, of course, before your 18th birthday. So what should be in a project? Next slide, got it. Okay. The first and most important page in the workbook is the contact information page. That has all the information on who you're working with and who the contacts are and whatnot. You can leave the project approval section blank until you actually meet with somebody for your district approval, but eventually that gets filled in as well. Your district approval person may want a copy of your proposal beforehand, so make sure that they check on that before they get too far into this. What should be in it again? We strongly advise looking at the entire workbook. Next slide, please. If you look at the entire workbook, you'll get a little better idea of what is the whole project going to be like. If you look at just the plan or the proposal section, you get a very limited view of this. And really, if you look at the final plan section, the second section, a lot of that, if you do a little bit of legwork in there ahead of time, it'll help you flesh out and have a better proposal as well. Next slide. Always. Now the new workbooks, of course, all expand as you type into them, but if needed, make sure you add extra sheets to any page in order to make sure that you've got a lot of detail in your project description. You want to describe the project fully and accurately because your approver from the district that's going to approve your project is going to want to have all of that information so that he's sure that you understand really what is going on and what is going to be needed. So next, please. And you should really figure out as you're going through there, even though it doesn't require it in the proposal section, how many people are going to be needed for some of your projects, activities, and some of the parts of the project. One thing some scouts don't realize is that they can use non-scouts as part of their projects. They can use adults as well. But the question is, how are you going to recruit them? That's one of the things that you'll have to cover in your proposal. The leadership needs to be meaningful. However, remember, your project approver is also watching out for projects that may be too big and maybe beyond the capability of a scout. As a project approver, I'll often caution scouts that, oh, you realize how much this is going to actually take in terms of time and labor and things like that. Now, if the scout really understands that and is going to go ahead, that's fine. I've had several projects that went over 10,000 hours, man hours, but the boy understood what was getting into it, and it really involved lots and lots of people to get that many man hours involved. But we want to be very careful that there's enough leadership in there, and realize that when your project's being reviewed, that if only family are involved in it, it's going to be questioned whether you're really doing a lot of leadership, because it's hard to lead your family. In your proposal, you need to have materials, supplies, tools, and equipment. All of those need to be covered. Think of each step as the boy should think of each step and phase of the project. What will be needed for each one of those. And then, like we said earlier, if you've looked at the final plan, you'll get a better idea of what additional information you're going to need. You should include costs. You should include how much time is involved. And always, even though the workbook doesn't have it, you can always add extra sheets to your proposal to explain things that you think might need some better explanation. Now, many projects have a lot of permission. Next slide, please. Many projects involve securing permissions. If you've got to get on the agenda of a city council, you need to consider that. Sometimes city council will have a 2-month backup waiting for people waiting to get on their agenda. So make sure that as they're planning, that they get the permissions and the permits all taken care of there. Next. Now, cost estimating and fundraising. A scout, like a good army, runs on its stomach, and food is always an enticement to participation. Gas, parking fees, permits, and all of that sort of stuff is needed. And if you're looking ahead at the planning section, a scout can possibly go ahead and at this point also fill out the fundraising permit, which is at the back of the planning section, and get that approved right as you're going through it. In our district, we ask that the boys have a fundraising application if they need funds, regardless of how big the project is. Officially, if it's under a certain amount, you don't actually have to have that signed off. But it's really good to have them do it in any case, because it gets them to think about the costs that are involved and where that money is going to come from, where it's going to be going to. So next slide. We want the boy to think about the project in terms of individual tasks, and those should be identified in the proposal. The most often heard advice I get from previous Eagles is, I wish I had done more or better planning. The question is how can we get the boys to do that? And this is where, when you're reviewing a project before, helping an Eagle candidate write his proposal, if you make sure that you cover that, it'll be pretty much better and they'll have a better idea of what's going to actually happen. Logistics and safety. Think about where each task is to be done and whether transportation and materials are going to be included in your plan. There's lots of stuff that has to go into that thought process. Next slide. For any detailed project, a detailed project plan is mandatory. The final plan should have a lot of detail in it. Just remember that that section of the planning section must be done when you're they're typing it out. Next slide. So what should be in it? Your signature, leader's signature, your unit committee's signature, and the beneficiary's signature. Once you've got those in the proposal, then the Eagle candidate can contact the district physician and get it approved. What did I have here? Okay, so next slide. At your meeting with the district representatives, you'll be asked to present your project just as you did to your beneficiary and your scoutmaster and your scout committee. When you're getting that approval, we want to hear you tell us what you're going to be doing, what you're actually going to be doing, why it's a good project, and who or how it will benefit, things like that. So, and make sure that you're prepared to take notes when you're getting your review. This is one reason why we ask that a advisor come along with you for your approval, because often you need to have notes taken, and having somebody along with you will help get the notes that you're going to avoid. I'm talking as though I'm talking to the kids now. District signature. If the proposal accepted, the district person will approve the project. If it needs more work, we're going to be very specific about what's needed. And we'll try to schedule right away an additional review session so that you can get the final approval. Now, next slide. No plan goes, project goes exactly as it's planned. Changes can and do happen. Please don't wait until the last moment to alert people to problems that might change the scope or the benefits of a project. If you're helping a scout as an advisor, watch for that. If a project goes completely awry, it may actually need to be completely reapproved. So be careful if you're advising the scout. If there's any question, always call whoever did the original approval and ask. Next. So as we already mentioned, the next part is the detailed planning of the project. The final plan section doesn't get approved, but it must be done. Actually, that's not completely true, but we recommend for sure that it be done. There's a lot of detail in that final plan section that helps flesh out details that you may not have, the scout may not have thought of. And if he goes through that detailed plan section, it'll be a much more successful project. So now let's move on to carrying out the project. Thing is, go out and have some fun. A spiral notebook or a method of recording everything, including conferences and approval meetings, is very highly recommended. Boys, even myself, a day afterwards, I'll forget details. If you write things down, write them away, then you got it recorded. Assign somebody to be a photographer. Keeping a busy parent out of your hair is a real good use or assignment for a parent if they're getting a little bit too involved in the project as far as directing it is concerned. So the bottom line is to go out and have fun. We want the boys to show their leadership, and they're going to learn leadership as a result of this whole project. So next. One more thing that's required, though, is you've got to write a final report. Next. Don't wait. I've had boys that have waited 3 months after they finished their project and said, oh, I'll get to that eventually. Things get forgotten. Take your proposal, update the charts and the descriptions for them to show exactly what happened, what was actually bought, what was actually spent, things like that. I recommend the boy do that very quickly after he finishes the actual project. Next. So we want the final report to tell us what went well. What was challenging? A lot of details are better than short, terse answers. The workbook looks like it can take little one-word and one-sentence answers for each thing, but each of those sections in the workbook expand, and the more they write about the details that went into it, the more it'll be interesting for them to go back to even and look at 10 years later on, what did I do for an Eagle project? So think of it as something, get them to think of their write-up as something they want a teacher to give them an A on. So changes. Changes are normal as part of a project. There'll always be something. It may be something very trivial, or they may be humongous. But we want the boy to list those changes and explain why the changes were made. Talk about leadership. What decision-making was involved in solving those problems. And then see additional sheets if you need to add sheets. Add photographs in of what you did. So, leadership. This was essentially, what did you learn from all of this? Did you demonstrate leadership? Did you have any challenging situations that you had to handle? Describe them. Talk about them. We want the boy to write as much detail as he can. It's going to be something he's going to really enjoy looking at later on, and even his own kids maybe later on, hey, Dad, what did you do for your project? If you follow the recommendation and just say, see additional sheets. What did you learn from this, really? So, take your proposal, then go back and update all your charts and descriptions to show exactly what happened, exactly what you bought, what you spent, where did the final costs come from, what happened in your project. Your final report should include hours data about materials and supplies used, things that happened during the project. Next slide. If you fill out the number of people in each category for total hours, you'll be amazed at how many man hours actually take place in doing a good project. We want the boy to attach a log sheet of each person. That's how he can keep track of hours. And remember, the boys often don't put down the hours they spent in writing the proposal. That's part of the project. We want them to put down all of the hours that are involved, including meetings with people, putting down when they come to meet with me. It sometimes takes an hour while we go over the project. That hour times 3 people, because it'll be me, the scout, and the advisor. 3 people times an hour, that's 3 man hours that should be included in there. Next, the funding report. If your project required any funds, the project needs to account for all of those monies. Were you short? Was the scout short on money? How did he handle leftover money? Did he handle a shortage of materials, or dispose of the excess and things like that? Whether it was donated to directly or provided to them in goods and services needs to be explained in part of this funding report, the funding part of the report, rather. During and after photographs, next slide. It should have as many as possible. Show the work, be something that you can lay out at your court of honor and have people go over and look at. It's something that you're going to be, the boy is going to want to be proud of. Using the electronic version of the workbook, which everybody does nowadays, of course, and your photographs are digital, you can actually insert them in it. But having an entire picture book of additional photographs next to a final report is another way of handling photographs. Once the project is completed, there's 3 signatures that are required. The first is the scouts, something that I'm very proud of and I'm wanting to sign my name to. Then your leaders backing you up. And finally, you want to have your beneficiary sign it. And one additional comment here, if the beneficiary gives you a letter of thanks, use that. And you don't necessarily have to go and bug him for an additional signature in the workbook itself. Attach that letter thanking you for the project and use that as your final signature. And for adults, remember, a project doesn't have to necessarily be successful or completed. If it wasn't, but the scout met all of the requirements of planning and giving leadership to others, the intention of the project has been met. In that case, the lack of a beneficiary signature will not detract from approving the Scout for Eagle. So, next slide. If Scout had a well thought out project or proposal, and he did what he said he was going to do, and he had a good report, and he described what happened and has records of it, there's little reason why it wouldn't be finally approved. That approval will actually come when the project report is reviewed during the Eagle Board review. Next. So, don't forget. Scouts often forget this. A scout is courteous. Make sure that they have formally thanked the people that they asked for help. They work with both individuals and businesses. Both of those appreciate a very formal written thank you. If you ever go into Home Depot, for instance, into the back room, you'll see a bulletin board with thank you notes from people that they've donated material to, for instance, or given a discount on. Make sure that the boys are courteous and actually send formal written thank yous to the people that benefited them. Next is filling out the rank application and getting the approval signatures and requesting letters of reference. Boys don't have to wait until the project is done to start working on their application. On the front of the application is a place to indicate 6 people that will vouch for you. In most districts, you request a letter of reference from each person. You list on the Eagle application, including the parents. Parents should write a letter as well, as they are the first line on the application. Letters of reference are to be sent to a person other than the Eagle Scout. In some districts, this will be a district person. In some districts, it will be a member of the troop leadership. We suggest that the Scouts give each person that they're asking a self-addressed stamped envelope pre-addressed to that designated person. The outside of the envelope should have that Scout's name on it, Eagle candidate, and in the lower margin, because when those letters get to whoever receives them, they are to remain unopened. They are opened in the Board of Review. So make sure that those envelopes have the Scout's name down in the lower left corner, perhaps. The Scout will not see these letters. They're reviewed by the Eagle Board and then destroyed after a successful Eagle Board. For adults, once the Scout has requested a letter, any follow-up is yours. Once the boy has filled out his application, it's up to the troop committee to make sure that the letters of reference come in. And lack of any response from a person asked for a letter shall not be held against the boy. There's no reason for delaying or withholding a Board of Review just for the lack of recommendation letters. So, next slide. So what happens next to the application? We explained to the boys that a copy is uploaded then to the council, and you adults will know in your own district how that's done. Right now we're moving to a new system where that's all going to be done online. And oh, okay, somebody's filled that in for me. I didn't have it on my original slide. The Eagle application, once it's completed, is uploaded to michiganscouting.org and Eagle Scout verification, and that's regardless of which district you're in. There's a single process for approving these. The Eagle application has to be approved by the council before an Eagle Board can take place. So, next slide. Okay, I've covered that. I've lost count. Okay, I'm back with you here. I'm working from a different screen here, so the council staff will verify all the information, and any discrepancies will be corrected by contacting the unit leader. Next slide. Next slide. Okay, once it's verified, a verification copy with the registrar's signature will be returned to the unit, and only then can a Board of Review be scheduled with the district representative. Next slide. The troop leadership, once they get that back, will contact the district person that is involved in setting up an Eagle Board of Review. I think in most every district, those are held at a unit level. There may be a couple of districts that actually do these at a district level. I'm talking to the entire council here, so I'm not really sure how every district does that. Next slide. So now the boy is ready for an Eagle Board of Review. Next slide. The Eagle Board of Review will consist of 3 to 6 people. The boy does not get to choose these people. That used to be a practice, and we've got to make sure that that does not happen. It'll include at least one member of the district advancement team. In some districts, I'm not sure if in other parts of the state they do that as a district level, where the district committee is actually doing that. But in our area, we do it as a unit board of review with a district representative present. So next slide. We tell the boys to relax. We know that they're going to be nervous. We tell them that there's no right and wrong answers. And for you people that are sitting on a board, remember that. There are no right or wrong answers. We're having a discussion about the boys' progress through the ranks and whatnot. Next slide. We'd explain to the boy how that is going to take place. Next slide. And we tell the boy to relax. Somehow I got this in here twice. Okay, next slide. Once the board review is completed, the paperwork is uploaded to the same website that we got the registrar approval from. And go on, next slide. One thing, if on the rare occasion a board does not approve an Eagle, the boy is invited back in to discuss the conclusions and to give his own input to it. The board has to give to the boy all of their reasons for not approving it in writing and what can be done if there's still time. Now, hopefully the boy is doing it long before his 18th birthday, but it does not. Unfortunately, it doesn't happen that often. And then the boy will be given how to appeal the decision, because a decision not to approve can be appealed to the district advancement team, and then beyond that to the council advancement team. So they will be given that. Next slide, please. Once the Eagle application is completed, please explain to the boys that it can take as long as 8 weeks to process applications. Once that happens, the National will create an Eagle certificate, and the certificate is mailed back to our service center. It used to be that from there it was mailed immediately to the Scoutmaster. I understand that there's some areas now where that's held at the service center. Corey, do you have anything later on that? Corey Grote, our advisor, is on the line here too.
Sure, Pete. So when you say in the past it was mailed to the Scoutmaster, that only applies to the area that you were in. That's not exactly how it was statewide. With our legacy field service councils, every area did this process a little bit different. So the national, let me go back to the first point where it says it takes as long as 8 weeks to process applications. The application itself is processed internally. So as soon as it's processed, it's right in ScoutNet that your young person is an Eagle Scout. But national, it can take up to 8 weeks to actually generate the certificate. We've had a lot of calls about that, especially in the last 6 months or so, because that's a new issue for us. And we
Okay,
just
that's
assured,
interesting to me because I hadn't heard that before either. Thank you.
and we just assure units and families that you can still hold your court of honor without the Eagle certificate, especially when you have circumstances where your young people are going off to college. But the National will only ship Eagle certificates to one office. And because we are one council, they go to Grand Rapids, which is where Rebecca, Alberta works out of. And from there, they literally arrive in a big case with, name and troop number and city. And so she has to sort them by where they go and then ships them off to local offices for the most part. She sends out an email to all of our support staff, letting them know what's being shipped where. But there are some districts that are nowhere near an office. So those get mailed directly to the unit. There are some cases where people have contacted us and said, we're not able, we got an email saying that our certificate is in and we need to pick it up at the scout shop of this location. We're not able to get there during scout shop hours. So if they just contact her email address is below and let her know, she works it out with the support staff in those offices. Rebecca actually oversees all of our support staff in the offices who work with Eagle, both verifications and contacting folks when those certificates arrive. So it's been a long journey in the last year to try to coordinate it so that every office does things the same. It wasn't that way when we went from 4 field service councils down to 1. So there's definitely been some hiccups that we've tried to iron out, and we're always open for new suggestions. But if you do have questions on where and when something's going to arrive, you can just send Rebecca an email. She does have a lot on her plate at times. So when she has a high demand, she'll put up an out of office response that lets you know what she's working on. But she does, when those Eagle certificates come into the Grand Rapids office, she does block out a whole day for sorting them and making sure that they get to the appropriate place.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, next slide. Okay, now you're ready to celebrate with a court of honor. Next slide. Oh, here, I didn't see this. There is a printable Eagle checklist for the boys to use. It contains all of the steps on becoming an Eagle, right from writing the proposal at the very beginning to finally having your board of review, and there's what to do, who does it, how and why it's done, and then a column in the middle for checking off. And so each of the boys that are going for Eagle should be given this just as soon as they decide that they want to go for Eagle. And this is a printable list, and it's available as of today, I understand, because it wasn't there yesterday.
And Pete, there's a request in to have it added. I don't believe it's officially on the website, but make sure when we're talking about this that this checklist is for the girls as well. It's for all scouts, boys and girls.
Sorry, you're dealing with an oldster that still talks in terms of boys. Okay.
Yep, all scouts.
My apologies to the ladies and the girls that are online. Okay, next slide, please. So, let's see, what is that? I don't know.
Yeah, Pete, I think this is where I pick it up. So first of all, I want to thank Pete for pulling that all together. As he mentioned, we'll make those slideshow available, but that's typically done by each of the districts for Life Scouts, Life or Star Life Scout, but typically Life Scouts. So inquire with your respective districts if you're looking for, hey, ask them when they're going to do the Life to Eagle presentation. It's a lot of details, and it really has been geared and written towards the scouts so that they kind of know what their role and responsibility and help demystify the process, because it is a lot of stuff to go through, and it's certainly not in the Eagle Scout or in the handbook. So anyway, so I want to go over. We are rolling out an Eagle Scout verification, and we recognize the transition with a lot of issues. And we heard folks, there that was due to the consolidation of areas. We also had some personnel changes and people left. As a result, that we found a situation where application or verification may have been dropped off at a office, and that person no works there, or to an email or direct to an individual, and he or she may have left, and then that means you got to go to that individual's email. So this Eagle Scout verification is ready to roll out. Part of the process is it now goes to a, so you have to fill it out, and you see the details. Ask Scout name. It's if you look at today, there's at least on the Great Lakes Division, there's 3 forms that individuals fill, and they go to certain people. Moving forward, you don't need to worry about who you need to go to. You fill out the name. One of the things you do identify the district. You get the Scout ID number, the things that typically this form is filled out by a leadership or the Scouts. So when you're getting ready to submit the Eagle Scout rank application for verification, you fill that form out. There are the 3 things that you have to attach. The Eagle Scout rank application that has all signatures. You also have to send a copy of life ambition statement that's signed. And then the thing that John and Pete talked about is the Eagle Scout project proposal. So for those who are not sure what that is, that's the first part of the service project. It goes all the way up to the 4 signatures are signed. So on the bottom, if you look at it, that's where you attach it. If you scan to the PDF, you load the rank application, the Scouts life ambition statement, and then you load the Eagle Scout project proposal. And now in there, it does require the contact person that in the event there's some questions about in the records, that master or advancement chair needs to be list, and you send that. And then that way, the good part of this is when you identify that's in the database. So if so-and-so's on vacation or whatever, the office gets those and they can process that. So you don't have to worry about getting lost. I believe that's available, and if you go to the advancement has a site on the council webpage. If you go to that, you'll find a lot of documents available. You'll find this thing available, and probably the new 12 steps will probably be there as well. Any questions on that? Please put them in the chat. We'll try to answer that. But you should go to the website and look at advancement. You should be able to find the Eagle Scout verification, and it's an online submission form.
And Perry, just to recap, I know some people are having some trouble hearing you. I noticed you turned off your video, which usually helps. Sounds like it might have just been a bandwidth problem. So this form was created to help with, as in legacy FSCs, we had the ability to have a support person in every office who worked with Eagle situations for their little corner of the world. Now that we're one big organization, we needed to mainstream that a little bit. So behind the scenes, Rebecca knows that she has specific support staff assigned to specific districts. But some weeks that changes because Jean in Auburn is on vacation, or someone in the Detroit office is assigned to another project temporarily. And so this is designed to help with backlog. So if something's submitted, it can automatically go to the support staff person assigned to that area. However, if they're backlogged or on vacation, someone else can pick it up, and there's a database. So nothing gets lost. So the days of, well, I handed it to my DE who said they would take it into the office for me, and it may or may not have ended up on so-and-so's desk. Now that we have all survived working and managing our time during a pandemic, a lot of folks are used to online submission forms, and we're just rolling this out to make that a lot easier for all of you, and to hopefully iron out some of those problems that we've had in the past. Now, that doesn't mean if something is turned in person, we won't accept it. We're rolling this out to try to move towards this so that we don't have as many of those issues. Like I talked about where, we find out weeks later it was really actually still in someone's briefcase in the trunk of their car somewhere, and that it didn't actually make it into that support staff person.
Yeah, so one of the things we talked about, this is the responsibility of the unit leadership to submit this, because in the event there are some questions that come up in terms of, there's a merit badge doesn't look right, the council needs to be able to contact, and so typically that's either the scoutmaster or the advancement chair in the unit that's names listed. And in addition, I believe the scout does need to provide you a copy of his life and vision statement. And in addition, he or she will fill out the rank application, and ultimately they'll probably give it to the unit leader for their last signatures, and that has to be scanned as a PDF. And typically we've asked scouts to send to their unit leadership the Eagle Scout project proposal in the PDF, and that, again, that's all the way up to the 4 signatures. And with that, Corey, do we have any lingering questions you want to ask or answer?
No, the question Corey just answered it. The merit badge applications, they can be turned in through your local district executive. In President Ford, we have a division merit badge division chair who ultimately approves those. They can be approved at the district level if your district actually has a merit badge chair. And again, you can work with your DEs or USEs on any of those. But any of those other questions, can roll up to the President Ford division chair, where we can provide some assistance. Please note, there are, I won't go into detail because I only remember a few of them, but there are certain merit badges as a counselor that you are required to have very specific training on, and those have to be included. So when you put forward an application to be I'll just use kayaking as an example, there's a requirement to be a certified kayak instructor. Again, I don't recall the details specifically, but there are at least a dozen or so merit badges that require certification, scuba being one of them as well. So please keep that in mind when you apply.
I'm just looking through a couple of these things in the chat. I wasn't able to watch them, of course, while I was talking, but there was one here. Can go into more information on how project cannot be completed but still be approved. There's no requirement that a project be completed and as originally designed. Things can happen as long as the project intent or the learning aspects of the project are done. that can still be approved even though it may not be signed off by an actual beneficiary.
Well, Perry, if there are no other questions in the chat or whatever, if you don't mind, I'd like to take up something else here because it's kind of hot off the presses and I think it's going to be of interest to the folks on this call. I have a communication from the program lead in our National Service Territory 9 regarding the Citizenship in Society Merit Badge. Apparently the National Program Committee met last week, and this is the latest information. I'm not going to claim it's necessary, the final information, because we all know this has changed, but this is the latest information. A soft launch is underway in 20 councils, and National is going to obtain feedback prior to a formal rollout. There was a webinar that was held last week for Scout executives, and I know Corey and some other folks from our council were on that webinar to get the information. There's a video overview and other materials that should be available in mid-October. So that's the current plan for things to be out kind of for preview, and the formal release date is November 1st. Now, some interesting things to know. There is not going to be a merit badge pamphlet, no book. All materials will be online for scouts and counselors. As I said earlier, that's kind of the trend. And it's a conversational program with the scout needing to do research. It's not a traditional merit badge. It really is going to call for a facilitator more than a counselor. So be careful when we're looking for people to lead this. It's designed really to be a scout doing research, presenting his or her point of view to the facilitator. The facilitator's point of view is basically irrelevant. We're not trying to impose our thoughts on the scouts, so we need to, we need to be very careful that we've got people who can handle that kind of a situation. Now, I said one-on-one, but obviously we've got youth protection, so there needs to be another person within sight, just as we do with Scoutmaster conferences and so on.
John, you've frozen.
So next July 22nd, Citizenship in Society will be a required badge for the Eagle Scout rank, raising the number, well, that's wrong, it says to 12, I think it's to 14, but keeping the minimum number at 21. Counselors, and for that matter, all of us, are strongly urged to take the new DEI training that's available on my.scouting. We all ought to do that like the day before yesterday. So that's the latest I have, Corey. I know you were on that. Is there anything you want to add to that information?
No, I don't have anything different than you have. We do have a whole slew of questions in the chat on that. One of them, though, is talking about a previous slide before you mentioned that. Someone wants to know why no video or PowerPoint presentations for the project proposal? Does somebody want to?
I'm sorry, say that again?
Well, I think that, I thought we were able to do that live, and I guess due to internet bandwidth, we've had some issue with that.
I'm not sure what the question was again.
The question was on project proposals. There was a note in, I think it was Pete's slide, that said no video or PowerPoint presentations.
No.
Well, the only thing that's approved is the workbook itself.
I think I see the question here. Is you talked, Pete, about adding photos and that, and this person is saying, could they do a video or a PowerPoint as part of their explanation? I think that's the question.
I guess the question is this for the approval originally, or is this as part of the final report?
The approval.
Okay, for the approval itself, I've had boys come with all sorts of different things, but the only thing that I'm going to look at least when I'm doing the approvals, is what's actually in the workbook proposal section itself. Some boys will come with huge display boards and things like that. They're nice additions, but the official document is what's in the workbook, and so that's what we're actually approving. So I don't know if that hits the question or not.
And then our other couple of questions, some of them have been answered, but John, you froze for a little while. So just in case, someone asked, will the Citizenship and Society be an Eagle required badge? And I think you had a date of July, was it beginning or end of July that becomes Eagle required?
It's actually July 1st. I think there was a miscommunication, 22nd, that's incorrect. It is July 1st of
Okay.
2022.
And then,
But to be clear, Corey, to be clear on that, because there's a question about our current Life Scouts required to complete it. And the answer is, if they have a board of review on or after the required date, July 1st or whatever the final date turns out to be, right now, I guess we're working with July 1st. If their board of review is on or after that date, yes, they have to have it. So if you got a scout who's close and doesn't want to get that that last merit badge, be sure they hurry up and get their board review before the end of June.
and then there was some questions about how to apply to be a facilitator for that badge versus a regular merit badge counselor. And I think we're still working that out. Every council has some decisions to make about how they're going to handle that registration process and the training process for those facilitators. So we're still waiting on some more information, and for our council committees and our scout executive to answer some of those questions that National has sent out for them before we release all of that. But we will, once the plan is established, get it out to everyone. I know Chris Hopkins is on standby, dying to promote it through the marketing department. But someone also asked, how do you add merit badges just in general? And I'm gonna, if you are already a merit badge counselor and you just need to add, you need to fill out another one of these forms that I put in the chat here. And those are submitted through your district. So as Troy said earlier, a lot of districts have an advancement chair or designee in their district who reviews those. Others do not, but your district executive can help you along with how to channel that for your specific area. So you can fill that out and get it to your district executive, and they will help make sure that gets processed for you. Dawn asked, what is the name of the merit badge again? And that is Citizenship and Society. So it's another citizenship badge.
There's another question about when will the requirements be available. As I said previously, they're being reviewed. They're expected to be out mid-October, sometime this month, but there is not a firm date yet. There was another question about do the facilitators for this badge need to be registered as merit badge counselors? Absolutely.
Any more, Corey? You're good.
I think that's all of them that I can scan and see.
All right. I'd like to wrap it up. First of all, I want to thank all the presenters and actually the panelists as well. A lot of work went into this, but that's only the first one. We haven't, you see on your slide, we have the second one that we have set up and that's going to occur in 2 weeks from now. It's actually one that we've got a lot of requests on, and one is how do you handle special needs relative to advancement? Because we're seeing more and more of those, and a lot of troops are just saying, I don't know what to do. So we have a presenter lined up to do that. That's actually very well qualified as part of the National Task Force on Special Needs. And then we're also going to roll out some Scout Book stuff 101. Most troops may know it, but we have a lot of packs and new units are trying to get involved with that. So we're going to have those two presentations in 2 weeks, and that's all I got. Corey, any last messages? Or?
Nope, just thank you. Thank you to everybody on the call as well for all that you do in your local areas for your scouts.